All right, here's a quick video. I'm going to go over to question 13. I'm not going to cover the whole thing. One, we're going to finish it in class and talk about it, but I just wanted to give you a heads up on kind of how to do this. All right, we're going to talk about interval and inequality notation, and we're going to use that according to this graph. So, and we got to answer the question, what is the highest altitude reached during the trip? So it wants us to talk about maximum, minimum, and all this kind of stuff up here. It says use inequality notation. All right, we want to talk about maximum or minimum, domain and range. That's kind of the huge thing. So up here, I think it said talk about increase and decrease. Yeah, where is it increasing, where is it decreasing? So I'm going to use arrows to talk about where it's increasing and decreasing. Arrow up is increasing. So where is it increasing? It's increasing, and when we talk about that, we want to talk about x values. It's increasing from 0 to 5, and I'm going to use brackets because brackets indicate that it includes those. Brackets would be a closed circle, parentheses would be an open circle, just so you know. Is it increasing at any other point? No, it's not increasing at any other point. So that would be increase. Now how do I do this from an inequality standpoint? I use the same numbers, 0 and 5, x is in the middle, and remember your inequality symbols, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, less than, or greater than. Both of these end up facing the same direction. So ask yourself, is x, or this value, any other value higher than 0, let's take 2, is 2 greater than 0? Yes. Can it be 0? Yes. If I got one of them, I get the other one. So there's your interval notation, and there's your inequality notation. Now, what about my intervals of decrease? And I'll change that and make that a little bit different. So down is decrease. Well, if we look, I have one interval of decrease, and then it changes. So I'm going to have two intervals of decrease. I can't say it decreases from 5 to 20, which I could, but somewhere in between it changes, the rate of change changes. So here's where we go. 5 to 12, so I'm going to say 5 comma 12 and use brackets, and I'm going to use a U, which is a union, and I'm going to use my other values from 12 to 20. So 12 comma 20. There is my interval notation for the decrease. Now what about my inequality notation? Well, again, use the same values, 5, x, and 12. Okay? Now, is 5 greater than? Yes. Can it be equal to? So there we go. There's the same. Now instead of a union, I'm going to use and. I'm going to use the word and then I use my other numbers, 12, x, and 20, and my symbols should also be the same. Right? So there's your interval notation and there's your inequality notation. Now something else it wants us to talk about is, what is the maximum? Well, it's going to have a maximum, and maximum would be over here. That would be a y output. What is the maximum altitude? The maximum altitude is 11,000, because it's in thousands of feet, is 11,000, not 10, I wrote 10 just because I looked at 10. 11,000 at what? At 5 hours. Okay? What is the minimum? The minimum is 2. Okay? So we have a maximum, and then we have a minimum. Minimum is 2 at, and that's going to be at 2 different points. That's going to be at 0 and at 20. 0 and 20. That's where your minimum is at. And then the next thing we want to talk about is domain and range. This is huge, right? This is not, follow this. This should not be complex, okay? It really shouldn't be that bad. Domain is x values, and we notate domain with a capital D. If domain is x values, I want to focus only on the x's. Where does my graph start? And where does it stop from an x perspective? I got some paper I'm going to put up here. So, where does it start? Where does it stop? Notice I covered up the y values here. Hopefully you can see this. Hopefully my hand's not in the way. Where does it start? It starts at 0 and it stops at 20. No matter what happens along in between, it starts at 0 and stops at 20. So my domain is 0, 20, and I'm going to use brackets. If I use interval notation. If I use inequality notation, it should be simple. It should be 0, x, and 20, and it should be less than or equal to and greater than or equal to. Again, compound inequality. So there's your domain. And then the last one we're going to talk about is the range. The range is abbreviated with the capital R. And what is the range? The range is not x values, the range is y values. So think of this is a good example. Think of altitude. What is the range of altitudes that we have? Well, I'm going to cover up the x numbers, and as high as it goes. So what's the minimum and what's the maximum? The minimum is going to be at 2. The maximum is going to be at 11. So my range is 2, 11. And again, it includes 2 and it includes 11, so there's brackets. Now what about the inequality notation? Again, don't overthink it. 2, x in the middle, and 11. Does it include 2? All of these dots are closed, so yes it does. X is a number greater than 2, and they both go the same way. And the last thing you have to answer is the question, what is the highest altitude reached during the trip? The highest altitude was 11,000 feet. So 11,000 feet. Make sure you include that somewhere in your answers. That's what I'm going to be looking for. And then today in class we're going to finish the others. I think we started 14. We're going to finish 15 and 16 in class. So you really didn't miss much, but understanding 13 will help you do 15. Do the rest of those. Ask questions as you need to, please.